Welcome, everyone. It is Wednesday, August the 19th, 2020. It is currently 5:23 p.m. Central Time. I'm still here at Victory Baptist Church. If you've been listening to all the live broadcasts today, I've been here now for a couple of hours. Let's see, I'm going on 3, 4, 5, about 3.5 hours, 4 hours. I've been here at Victory Baptist Church, and I've turned on the microphone a number of times to go live. Obviously, I've got the Wednesday evening service to do tonight, and just a lot of things going on. And I thought I'd turn on the microphone again because just a little while ago, someone sent me a list of what they are calling some of the best church history books, and I was like, well, that looks like an interesting list. Let's share it with everyone. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share it with everyone. Now, please note, let's make this very clear. It's very important. When it comes to church history books, this is so important. When you come to church history books, you cannot deny, I don't care who writes the book, they have their own presuppositions, they have their own perspective, they have their own theological leanings, and you have to just understand that. I'll give you an example. You're going to have some church history books that hate the Catholic Church, and they're going to give you every flaw, every wrong, everything done wrong in the history of the history about Catholicism. They're going to tell you everything wrong with it. Others love Catholicism, and they're going to try to do everything to make church history look favorable. Everyone has their perspective. Everyone has their presupposition. Everyone has their agenda. Some are going to be very pro-Catholic. Some are going to be very against Catholicism. Some are going to be very pro the Protestant Reformation. Some may be very against the Protestant Reformation. You just have to see through all of that. You've got to try to figure out what is factually being reported in the history book and what is opinion, what is interpretation. On every page, you may get fact, and with that fact may come an interpretation, an analysis, a perspective, and you've got to just set aside, okay, here's the fact. Let's ignore their interpretation for a moment. Let's ignore their opinion about it. Let's just get the fact down. And then you look at the fact and you remember that fact and you write that fact down in your notebook. Then you can go read what they had to say about it, their analysis of it, their interpretation of it. Just realize it's going to come from a perspective, an agenda, a presupposition. An agenda is there. It may be for the Greek Orthodox Church. It may be for the Roman Catholic Church. It may be against. It may be for the Protestant Reformation, against the Protestant Reformation. It may be for this. It may be against this. Some church history books are written from a very secular perspective, may be very antagonistic to everything related to the church. Some will be obviously very pro-Christianity in their approach. Don't deny yourself knowledge simply because you don't like the perspective the book is written from. All right. That's a foolish way. Some people only want church history books that make their side look good. Hey, give me a church history book that tells me how bad Catholicism is and how wonderful Protestants are. Any other church history book I don't want to read. That's no. You'll never learn church history that way. You'll never become an actual student of church history. You're going to become a student of historical interpretation and analysis that supports your side. That's not a student of church history. Church history, you study the history of the church, the good, the bad, the ugly. And you don't care if it makes your side look good or make your side look bad. What you care about is trying to find the facts. And then it's perfectly okay to read other church history books that offer a very biased perspective. It's okay to get that perspective. Just ensure you have the facts down first. It's the facts. Get the facts first. Then all of the different stuff thrown into church history books. Okay. But some people only want church history books. I hate that. Like you'll if you go to a Bible college, go to a seminary, in many cases, they're going to only give you church history books that agree with their theological tradition, their theological background. Like if it's a Protestant seminary that's very much attached to Reformed theology, then they're going to give you church history that's going to promote that viewpoint. And they're going to give you a church history book that will very much be very against Catholicism. If you go to a Catholic university, You may get a church history book that's very pro the Catholic perspective and against everything else. You're not actually learning church history that way. You're not actually learning church history that way. You've got to set that aside and go, okay, let's get the history. Let me get the facts. And the only way you're going to do that is you got to read multiple books from multiple perspectives. First, you got to throw out all the other noise. Get to the facts about what happened. Get to the timeline. Get to the events. Get to the people. Get to all the details, all the facts. Then you got to look at all the different interpretations of those facts, all of those different analyses, and then try to figure out what the truth actually is. So I'm going to give you a list of books. They're going to come. I think most of these are going to come from definitely a more pro-Catholic perspective. So be aware of that. But that doesn't mean they're not valuable. That doesn't mean they're not helpful. All right. I've seen non-Catholic history books that are so poorly done when it comes to church history that they actually will confuse you and they misrepresent church history. So I've seen, just be aware of what you're getting into when you study church history, and you just want the facts. That's all you want. Sometimes those facts are going to make you uncomfortable. They may not make your doctrinal position, ooh, I don't like that. That's okay. You deal with it. All right, because you're going to be a student of church history. Here's the article that was sent to me. This is the headline. Some of the best books on the history of the church, according to historians. Now, I like that. This is going to be a list of some of the best books on church history, according to historians. Hey, I like that. Let's see. Now, please note, those historians have a perspective. They have a theological tradition, that they have a perspective. This article was published August the 19th, 2020. So this is really new. It was published today. If you're troubled by current events, history can give you a reassuring perspective. Here's where you can start. Now, I like that. Sometimes when we look at the present, sometimes the best way to interpret the present is to spend some time reading about the past. We see things happening in the present, and we sometimes can exaggerate it, act like, oh, we've never seen anything like this before. I can't believe what's happening to the world today. And you want to go, yeah, the world that, remember when that happened, and that happened, and that happened, and that happened, and that happened? Yeah, I think we've seen as bad or worse. All right. So sometimes when you're concerned about the present, take some time to go and read about the past. I think that's very important. Here's how this article continues. Someone recently remarked that with 2 popes living and a pandemic raging throughout the known world, we now know what it feels like to have lived in the 14th century. Right? That's a pretty funny opening line. Someone recently remarked that with 2 popes living, right, and a pandemic raging throughout the known world, we now know what it feels like to have lived in the 14th century. Now, while it might make for a cute internet meme, the comparison has a lot of holes in it. Nevertheless, with so much division in contemporary society, wars percolating in several parts of the world, geopolitical rumblings, more and more people facing starvation, old age beliefs being called into question, and civil liberties under pressure everywhere in the globe, some people feel there have never been a time in history when things feel so fragile. That's how we feel right now. We've never experienced anything like this. And sometimes reading history is a good antidote to that feeling. Sometimes we feel like it can't get any worse. This is the worst it's ever been. You got to go read history. And then you're kind of like, okay, well, maybe my feelings are not accurate. They said reading history is a good antidote to that feeling, an exercise that assures us that our world has been through much of the same in the past. The same applies to the church. It's true that there is more and more secularism and less faith in many societies. One might be tempted to think that in a generation or two, Christianity will be a minority religion in the world. Christendom has had a series of revolutions, and in each one of them, Christianity has died. All right? Now listen to that again. Christendom has had a series of revolutions, and in each one of them, Christianity has died. G.K. Chesterton wrote in The Everlasting Man, and I quote, Christianity has died many times and risen again, for it had a God who knew the way out of the grave. That's That is true, all right? There's been plenty of times in history where it may have been like that's it. Christianity is done. It's not going to survive. It's finished. And then it finds a way to rise from the grave again. And Chesterton said, because it has a God who knows the way out of the grave. And I think that's a powerful reminder. And church history reminds us of this, reminds us of difficult times, of scandal, of failure, of schism, of chaos, and somehow Christianity continues. Now, I will argue Christianity may already be the minority religion as far as Christianity actually being practiced in any real meaningful way, but that's a whole different discussion. The historical perspective is worth much more than 100 attempts to explain what's happening today through contrived theories. I think that's interesting. Historical perspective is worth more than 100 attempts to explain what's happening today through contrived theories. A lot of times when you talk to people and they have all of their theories and ideas, you many cases you can hear that they're void of any understanding of history because you're like, they don't have a historical perspective. But when you're dealing with 2,000 years of Christian history, who but the most dedicated of historians has the time to read even a fraction of the volumes and volumes of the history of the church? If you're not quite sure where to begin, we have a little guide to you, all right? So they've reached out to a number of historians, and they asked them a question. If you could recommend just one book, what would you say is the best work on church history? While considering this list, it's good to bear in mind a caveat that one of our sources pointed out. After 30 years of teaching church history, I've concluded that there is no good single-volume history of the church that is suitable for the general reader. Right. And there's some truth to that. There is not really just one. Look, you can't just read one book in church history and say, "Oh, look, I got it figured out." There's not one good book for the general reader. There's just not. You've got to read and study church history on a regular and consistent basis. You got to study it. You have 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 to listen to the different perspectives. Remember, I've stated it so many times. Church history. Think of church history. You do some digging. And then you find something like, what is that? And you pull it out, and it's this giant ball of yarn, right? With all of these threads wrapped and entangled. And in the study of church history is you dust off the ball of yarn and you sit down and you start pulling out the different threads. You pull out the different threads and you look and examine each one. And then finally you lay them all out. Church history is this mumbled mess of events, of people, of ideas, of doctrines, of philosophies, of church disputes, of denominations, of fight, of war, of heresy, of just all kinds of stuff. And it's just church history. It's all grouped together. And your job is to try to go and look at each part, pull it out, examine it. And then once you pull it out and examine it, guess what is also in that ball of yarn? About 1 million different perspectives, theories, and opinions. And so it can become overwhelming, but you can't let it overwhelm you. You just take one piece at a time, look at it, consider it, and move on. And you're going to have to come back and study that piece again because you're going to hear about that same piece of information from about 30 different perspectives as you study church history. And you have to do it that way. But I completely agree. There's no good single volume history of the church that is suitable for the general reader. I agree with that. All right. But all the one volume histories have, here's what someone else says. But all the one volume histories have two problems. One seems the case for all of them. Except for the small period and place the author is an expert on, they are written from dated and flawed secondary literature. All right, that's interesting. The second problem is that they too often have ideological axe to grind. That is to say, they are written to forward some political or theological project in the contemporary church favored by the author. Oh, I hate that. And again, that's what. Okay, so let's go through this. So sometimes this is some of the problems with the books. They are written from dated and flawed secondary literature. All right. Now that's always a problem. If it's secondary literature, flawed sources, then the information is going to be called into question. So you always try to get back to primary sources. You got to go back to original sources. You got to be a detective in the study of church history. But this is so important. In many cases, church history, there's an ideological axe to grind. And here's how it's played. All right. If you are a promoter of Reformed theology and you think the Protestant Reformation was the greatest thing ever and you think Reformed theology is the way to go, then you study church history simply with the goal of proving Reformed theology. So you go back to church history and you teach that church history using the past to try to prove your current theological perspective. So you go back to read Augustine, you're going to make Augustine sound like, he was Calvin and that he promoted, Reformed theology. And you're going to read and you're going to create a portrait, you're going to create a picture of Augustine that favors your theological flavor. All right. Does that make sense? Your theological perspective. And that's not fair. You don't go back to the past to try to go, oh, look, they believed what we believe. Don't do that. Do not do that. Do not go back and go, they were who they were then. These are all the different things they taught. Some we agree with, some they don't agree with. And you look at them as human beings, complex. You don't try to make them fit your narrative. All right. They're not there as Plato for you to mold to try to prove a theological point. That's not the way we're to do it. And that's how so many pastors teach church history. All right. So here is some of that book. All right. Here is one book. All right. That some believe don't have some of those problems we just talked about. Now, the problem with this is it's it's an academic handbook, and, well, it's 11 volumes, but I'll just give you the name of it. It's called History of the Church by Hubert Jedin, Jedin, and John P. Dolan. History of the Church by Hubert Jedin, Jedin, and John P. Dolan. Now, if I mispronounce their names, I apologize. Let me see if there's a link here to Amazon. Yes. Oh, and guess what? It's not even available. Man. Yeah. Finding a copy of that may be it's out of print. Yeah. So some of these are going to be, sometimes it's the ones that are going to be really good that are, yeah. Okay, but History of the Church by Hubert Jedin, Jedin, and John P. Dolan. If you can find a copy, you really should. A lot of people really say that this book avoids some of those problems. And it doesn't rely on secondary sources, and it doesn't really have an ideological axe to grind. The only problem is it's an academic handbook, and it's probably not going to be available in most places. If you can do a search, used bookstores, eBay, start digging. Maybe you can find the 11-volume set. History of the Church, Hubert Jedin, Jedin, and John P. Dolan. All right. Now, for a more narrowly focused study, there's a book that's received a little bit of praise called Reformations by Carlos Eire, E-I-R-E. Reformations. Okay, this is going to go to Yale. It's out of print too. Man. I'm checking. This list is brand new, but some of these books are out of print. You may have to do. You may have to really have to do some digging for this one. It's called Reformations. Carlos M. and then Eire, E-I-R-E, E-I-R-E. I'm reading this from the Yale website, the Yale University. It says a lively, expansive history of the Protestant and Catholic Reformations and the changes they set in motion. Sounds like a very good book. Hang on, let me see here. Ooh, let's go to Amazon. Oh, yes. It's in, okay, you can get it on Amazon. It's going to cost you a pretty penny, okay? Here we go. You can buy it used for $26. You got it You can buy a used copy for $26. So that's pretty good. It's called Reformations, the Early Modern World, 1450 to 1650. So this is not going to get you all the way back. They'll get you, but this is a lively, expansive history of the Protestant and Catholic Reformations and the changes they set in motion. All right. This is called Reformations. Again, the name of the author here is Carlos, C-A-R-L-O-S, Carlos, E-I-R-E. All right. E-I-R-E. Reformations. The Early Modern World. You can find it on Amazon. All right. This is, and you definitely, and now here's the name. Yeah. Carlos. I got that right. E-I-R-E. All right. Making sure. Carlos, E-I-R-E. He's got two middle initials, M and N, but Carlos Eyre, E-I-R-E. All right. There you have it. It's $26 for used, $45 for new. So yeah, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. All right. And again, a lot of the average people won't purchase these books. That's why churches should have libraries, not to sell books, not a bookstore, but libraries, so that people can get these books. All right. And they can read them for themselves. All right. So I probably need to try to get this Reformations book for our church library. All right. Something I need to do. All right. So Reformations by Carlos, C-A-R-L-O-S, Eyre, E-I-R-E. And I know some of you will get irritated by me repeating this, but I'm repeating it because I'm believing that people are going to write these down, right? And if you need a link to all of these, let me know, all right? The next one is, I want to see which one I want to go. Let's go with History of the Catholic Church by James Hitchcock. History of the Catholic Church by James Hitchcock. I believe this one is available. See, look here. I'm looking. Yeah, James Hitchcock, History of the Catholic Church, from the Apostolic Age to the Third Millennium. This it's going to run you between $35, $29. You've got some different ways of getting this. I'm going to do a search here. I'm going to do a search for it on Amazon. This opened up to Ignatius Press. I had to buy a lot of books from them from when I was in Catholic University. See, here we go. This one is available on Amazon. It is available for a Kindle for $16, hardcover $27. So this one's a little bit. The History of the Catholic Church from the Apostolic Age to the Third Millennium. James Hitchcock, Hitchcock, Hitchcock. This one definitely is going to probably be written from a more Catholic perspective, but here's the key. If you're going to study church history, you're going to try to avoid the study of the Catholic Church. I don't know how to tell you this. You're not really studying church history, okay? That's kind of like, I'm going to study church history, and I don't want to study one stinking thing about the Catholic Church. Okay, you just move on to a different topic, okay? Because that's not going to work for you very good, all right? So there you have it. That's called The History of the Catholic Church. So what do we got so far? We've got the let's go through these. What do we have here so far? We have let's see here. We have, where's the first one that I gave you? Yeah, The History of the Church by Hubert Jedin, Jedin, and John P. Dolan. Remember, that one's 11 volumes, and you're probably going to have a hard time finding it, but if you can find it, you should. History of the Church by Hubert Jedin, Jedin, and John P. Dolan. Look, if your church has a library, help them out, all right? Help them out. I would like to get those. If you can find those 11 volumes for cheap, let me know. Or if you have those 11 volumes and you don't want them, send them to me here at Victory Baptist Church. I'll put them in the library that's behind this door, right? Behind me, all right? Next, Reformations by Carlos Eyre, E-I-R-E. Carlos, that's probably the correct way. Carlos, E-I-R-E. I'm horrible with names. All right, that's Reformations. That one, we found. The History of the Catholic Church by James Hitchcock. That one is available on Amazon. History of the Catholic Church by James Hitchcock. All right. They do say, most say that this is a very balanced book, but you can draw your own conclusion. Next, all right, A Popular History of the Church by Philip Hughes. Philip Hughes. A Popular History of the Church by Philip Hughes, Hughes. Okay? A Popular History of the Church by Philip Hughes, Hughes. Let's see if it's available on Amazon. It is available for Amazon for $26.95. That's a little much, but okay. A Popular History of the, it's basically, well, hang on, this opens up, let me make sure I got the right book here. Yeah, A Popular History of the Catholic Church, okay. A Popular History, or not the Catholic Church, A Popular History of the Church by Philip Hughes, Hughes. According to some, it's very readable, takes us up to the modern period. It's extremely fair and judicious, according to some. It traces the development of the church from its first century beginnings to 1946. So, and I guess this was written in I guess this is an older book, published in 1960s. All right, so there you have it. Obviously, it's probably going to be very Catholic in its nature, but again, it's very critical in at least understanding that. All right. Now, this one would be really interesting to read. You ready? A Dictionary of Popes by J.N.D. Kelly and Michael Walsh. A Dictionary of Popes by J.N.D. Kelly and Michael Walsh. Now, this one looks very interesting. Let's see if they have this. Of course, it didn't pop up on Amazon. Give me a second. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go over to Amazon really quick. I'm going to do a Dictionary of Popes. Yep. Oh, here we go. Oh, wait. Is this the same one? A Dictionary of Popes. This is for $8.87. So that looks pretty cheap. Let me go back to this list here. They say a Dictionary of Popes by J.N.D. Kelly and Michael Walsh. This work is the gold standard among papal histories. All right. So that's a lot of praise. That's a lot of praise here. Let me jump over here and make sure that, yep, okay, that's it. So it is available. Oh, wait, hang on. Let me go to the Amazon page. Yes. So the Amazon page, that's $8.87. $8.87. I'm going to save this one because I can afford that one. I'm going to save that one right now. That would be an interesting one to look at some point. I'm going to save that right here. So it's called A Dictionary of Popes. That's how it's listed on Amazon. A Dictionary of Popes, $8.87. This fascinating dictionary gives concise accounts of every officially recognized pope in history. Now, obviously, they're going to go with the ones the Catholic Church recognizes, so obviously Peter is going to be listed. All right? They're going to all the irregular elected rivals, the so-called anti-popes. Each pope and anti-pope's entry covers his family, social background, etc. So that looks pretty interesting. All right, that looks pretty interesting and could be very helpful. A Dictionary of Popes by J.N.D. Kelly and Michael Walsh. All right, next. I'm going to give one more right now, and then we may come back and I may do another recording. I'm just giving you I'll give you one more. Right, Religion and the Rise of Western Culture. Religion and the Rise of Western Culture by Christopher Dawson. D-A-W-S-O-N. Religion and the Rise of the Western Culture. Religion and the Rise of Western Culture by Christopher Dawson. All right, now this, I'm going to see if it's available on Amazon. This took me to a different website. Here we go. I'm on Amazon. Let's delete that. Yep, And it's for $7.99 for Kindle. All right. Religion and the Rise of Western Culture by Christopher Dawson. Religion and the Rise of Western Culture by Christopher Dawson. All right. That's another book that seems to have been given some praise. Let's see here what they have to say. It says they add that Dawson's. There's another book they want to recommend by this person. I'll just stay with that right now. I'm not going to go through any more because I've been 30 minutes and just reading off names of books. I can come back. Depending on the response, I'll give you more. If nobody cares, I won't give you any more. But there you have it. Religion and the Rise of Western Culture by Christopher Dawson. So let's go back through all the ones I have given you here, okay? Let's go through all the ones I've given through you one more time. You ready? The History of the Church by Hubert Jedin, Jedin, and John P. Dolan. History of the Church. Remember, that's 11 volumes. It's an academic handbook. This is what some people believe is kind of a gold standard of church history books. You can look for it if you can. Next, Reformations by Carlos Eyre, E-I-R-E. Reformations by Carlos Eyre. History of the Catholic Church by James Hitchcock. Next, A Popular History of the Church by Philip Hughes, Hughes. Next, A Dictionary of Popes by J.N.D. Kelly and Michael Walsh. Next, we have Religion and the Rise of Western Culture by Christopher Dawson. There you have it. Those are some books that are considered some of the best church history books by historians. Now, those books definitely, I already know the name of some of them and I'm familiar with some of those. Definitely there's a Catholic bent towards some of those. But hey, even if it deals a lot with Catholic history, that's a major element, a major part of church history. It's a major part of Christian history. You can't deny it. You can say, who cares? It still influenced Christianity. And so you want to know, if you want to know church history, you've got to know all the different aspects. Again, you can't just go, wait, give me that book about Baptist. That's all I need. Come on, man. Church history, we're all lumped together in like a ball of yarn. And we have to pull out the individual strands and see what was happening and how this influenced this and how this influenced that. You have to be willing to do that or you're not actually studying church history. And if you don't want to know the history of the church, then okay. All right. To me, I'm baffled by Christians who don't want to know the history of the church. If you don't want to know the history of the church and the history of the faith, then why claim to be a Christian? Right. And listen, your ignorance of church history does not negate its impact upon you, your life, your Christian faith, and your church. Your church has been impacted by church history, whether anyone ever studies the subject there or not. They're just ignorant of the thing that's influenced them. They're going to tell you it's coming from the Bible, and in many cases it doesn't come from the Bible, it comes from church history, and they just don't know that. All right, I'll stop right there. If you have any questions, you need any help with any of these books, email me at newsif@yahoo.com. 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 Be a student of church history. It's very important. It gives us a historical perspective on current events, and that is invaluable. All right, God bless.